All right, welcome to The Hub, a podcast about daily economics and politics. I'm Matt Hubbard, I'm your host, and today we have Mark Matthews as our guest. Mark Matthews is what we would call, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, but I'm going to say you're a never Trumper.
Sure. I mean, that's the label that's been assigned to us. So
That's the label.
I'll
Yeah,
accept it.
you might not agree with the label, but that's the label that's been assigned to you.
Yep.
As you guys might remember from last week's episode, I interviewed a Trump supporter, and this is all part of a 4-part series. So last week was a Trump supporter. This week is a never Trumper, which is someone, I guess, who would or identifies as more of a Republican, but doesn't like the future or doesn't like what has happened to the Republican Party, doesn't like Trump, is not going to vote for Trump. And then in a couple of weeks, we'll have a Biden supporter, and then we'll end with a Bernie supporter as well. So maybe with that, we'll go ahead and get started. Mark, why don't you introduce yourself? Maybe give just like a little background of like who you are, what you're doing currently. Then I'll start asking you some tough
Sure.
questions.
Yeah. So Mark Matthews, I mean, by all definitions, my background tells you I'm a Republican, or was a Republican, right? I was small town Utah, chemical engineer, working oil and gas, moved to Texas for a while. All of those things just like shout Republican, right? So,
especially, I don't know if it's the Utah or the oil and gas. I'm still trying to figure out which
in Texas, and yeah, it's like, so yeah, chemical engineer. Graduated from BYU. That's where I met Matt. Moved to Texas for a while. Now I'm back in Utah, working in the oil and gas industry.
So still in the oil and gas, and
Yep.
it's tough to leave Utah once. I guess it's tough to leave home. So I guess why don't you say, when you reached out and you offered to be a guest, you mentioned Trump was incredibly divisive. Before we get into Trump and what's happened with the Republican Party, like what has been your view of what has happened? I would say in the last 4 years, or however long you want to say, like what has happened to the Republican Party that makes it hard for you to be like, yeah, I'm a Republican?
Oh, sure. I mean, to me, it's like the Republican Party is not a party of ideals anymore. It's, Reagan like famously said so Reagan used to be a Democrat before he was a Republican, right?
Yep.
And he famously said, like, I didn't leave the Democratic Party, the Democratic Party left me. That's how I feel about the Republican Party right now.
Great line, great quote. But like, what in particular about
Sure.
The Republican Party leaving you, so to say? Like, what would you say?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So like, if you want to get into policy issues, like there's so many things that Republican Party used to stand for that doesn't stand for. It's done a complete 180 on, right?
Yeah.
So like things like suddenly we're big fans of Putin when we used to be anti-Russia, very hardliners on Russia. We used to be free trade, and now we're left of Bernie on free trade, right?
Yep.
It's used to be things like balancing the budget deficit, anti-corruption, pro-small government, pro-legal immigration, strong proponent of NATO and defense allies, culture. I mean, or like culture and civility and things like that. The real compassionate conservatism that's all gone. And in fact, it's just like it's a party of it's a cult of personality now. It's not really a party of principles. So.
Yeah, it's tough to say you're the party of free markets, small government, when fiscal conservative when you add $3 trillion to the debt and in under 3 months. And I do understand there's a pandemic.
Yeah, I mean Republicans have always said that they are for balancing the budget and reducing the deficit, when in reality the Democrats have done a better job at it. That's just fact, right? The deficit has decreased more under Democratic presidents than Republican presidents, and maybe it's just because I don't know, delayed policy initiatives or what. You can
whether Republicans
you want to.
Whether Republicans had control of the House and there was a Democrat in the White House and forced.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, if you're looking purely at presidencies, like under Democratic presidencies, the deficit has been reduced more than under Republican presidencies. And so there's lots of things you can talk about, but really it's the things that the Republican Party used to profess as like being their ideals, or just people abandoned them overnight, which meant that they were either lying back then about what they believed, or they're lying now about what they currently believe, because they're completely opposite of one another.
Yeah. What would you say though to someone who says like, okay, look, like Republicans, like current state of the Republican Party, like Trump's gonna go. He's not gonna be, you know, 10 years down the road, he's not gonna be like in driving. I find it hard for him to be, he's going to be, he's the politician for this time and age, but like 10 years down the road, there'll be another politician. The party will be different. Like, he's not going to be like a looming figure. Maybe he will be, maybe he won't. But like, what would you say to someone who's like, well, the only other option is to vote for Biden and the Democrats. And like, if you believe in free trade and, small government, Democratic Party is not exactly one to like, you know, their policies and their initiatives, the Green New Deal, increase taxes. Like, it's hard to say like you can find yourself in that camp and feel pretty comfortable. Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah, I understand. I mean, so like under Reagan, like the Republican Party was like the big tent party. That's what they professed, right?
yeah,
Maybe it was just like Cold War stuff, or I don't know. But it was like the Cold War brought everybody together who had all these different ideals into one party. People who had different thoughts on social issues and things like that. And it was a big tent, right? It covered a lot of people. I feel like much more now the Republican Party is not a big tent. I mean, if you don't bend the knee to Trump, use like a Game of Thrones reference, bend the knee to Trump, you're like kicked out, right? I mean, and the Democratic Party is becoming much more of a big tent. They're willing to. I mean, the thing is, you saw in the primaries for the Democrats that they had Biden, and they had such diverse opinions, right? They had Bernie to Biden, which is like, if you were in Europe, those would be two completely different parties. They would be two completely different political parties. But the Democratic Party encompasses all of that. So, I mean, if you're not on board with the Green New Deal, well, that's a lot of Democrats are not on board with the Green New Deal.
Yeah.
So, I would say that there's you'd be in good company, and you can find your niche in the Democratic Party.
Yeah, and and that's kind of what I brought up with the Trump supporter last week, is like both parties have kind of changed quite a bit. Trump also destroyed the Republican Party, but also brought in new supporters. You have these blue collar people from, the Midwest states who would never vote Republican. That was the party of greedy capitalists, and,
Yep.
but now now they vote for Trump. And, by the same token though, the Democrats, have brought in new people, and you've kind of seen that in their Democratic National Convention, right?
Yeah.
You had a lot of former lifelong Republicans speaking at this convention saying like, hey, look, like Trump's not the future that we want. Like, and I think, for me, I guess the telling point was Biden being elected as the nominee instead of Bernie or one of these other candidates during the process, right? I mean, the black vote essentially said, no, we don't want one of these more far out candidates on the Democratic side. We don't want, Elizabeth Warren, or we don't want, Bernie. We want Biden, who's kind of been a moderate, people might argue, say, no, he's pretty far left, and like, he won't, tell off the left, the far left, but, Biden seems to be pretty, left of center. And I don't know. You could argue that he's not much of a candidate mentally. He's pretty old, and
So Biden's just bland. He's bland, right? He's a bland candidate. Like, you can't get around that. That's the truth. He's a bland candidate, but he doesn't make a lot of people excited on either side. Maybe but he is at least. I mean, I would say he's inherently moral. He's inherently honest. He's those kinds of things that I cling for, because I mean, the Republican Party used to be about the culture of America was the most important thing, right? The culture is what preserved America. It's what preserved American ideals. And I would say that Trump is completely against that culture that the Republican Party has said they're for so long. And Biden actually espouses that culture. He's genial. He's honest. He's
seems to get along. Yeah, seems to get along with other people across the aisle.
He's willing to listen to people. He's willing to take advice from other people. He realizes his limits, things like that. So to me, at least, like when you talk about like culture and American culture like being preserved. I feel like that's much more special than Biden than Trump.
Yeah, no, I think, well, this is more for analysts, but for me personally, I definitely think, I think Biden is, yeah, I think he's a good dude. I think he's just like a good dude. He is a bit bland, but, it, the way I like to think about it is like, if I had kids and, I was like, I wouldn't be espousing Trumpian, ideals to my kids to be like, hey, this is how you handle issues, or this
Oh,
is
absolutely. I mean, to think about it, if Trump was your like Boy Scout leader, if he was your teacher, would you want him as a teacher of your children?
no,
Would you want him as the Boy Scout leader of your children?
yeah,
Then why do you want him to be the president? I mean,
yeah.
it's just like he's a bully. He clings. He says that you're a chump if you don't win. It's all about winning. That's what the Republican Party really stands for now. It's not about any ideals. It's about beating Democrats. That is the one platform that the Republicans stand for right now, is beating Democrats. It's the one thing across the board.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's I think that sentiment is shared by a lot of people, ex-Republicans. So, I thank you for kind of expressing that as well. I guess I kind of want to go a little bit of a different direction. What if you were to say, let's say Trump loses badly, what would you like to see the future of the Republican Party? Like, where would you like to see it go? Because I've just a little preface, like a little story. So I've had this conversation with, my family, and it's like, Trump's kind of the loudest voice within the Republican Party. And I don't know if I want to amplify that voice within the party.
Sure.
And like, I get, blue collar, white, like uneducated people have really felt the brunt of a lot of the policies the last 20 years. Why is Trump not in favor of free trade? It's because all of his supporters have felt, their towns being destroyed by these free trade agreements, whether that's good or bad. So I can understand that sentiment a little bit, but for me, I don't want Trump to be that loudest voice. I don't want him to be driving the future of the Republican Party. So I kind of don't want to, encourage him by voting for him.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I hate to break it to you, win or lose, Trump's not going away. I mean, you think his loyal fan base, that the cult of personality now, is not going to be listening to his Twitter, and he's not going to be all over Fox News and Breitbart and everywhere when he leaves? Yeah, he's not going away.
I don't really worry about like Brett Barr, Fox News, all the things, because like to me that's more of a technology revolution. People can find whatever narrative of the news, whatever version of policy they like to find. On the left, they have their own version of Brett Barr, Fox News, whatever. And I just think the internet and technology have allowed people, everyone having to turn into ABC, which was biased left, now they can go to Brett Barr and find whatever news.
Yeah, that's a whole nother topic, right? Is like, you're in an echo chamber, and when you only hear the things that reinforce the way you think, then that's not. I mean, so that's a whole other topic. But
okay, but so back to the original question, because I think Trump will fade away. I really do. I don't think his policies or his more anti-immigration, more hardline free trade, which ironically was like Democratic positions like in the 80s and 90s. Like you kind of look back at history and you're like, wait, this is like an old school Democrat. Like why is he the future of the Republican Party?
Yeah.
Like who would you like to see? Like what direction would you like to see the Republican Party go?
So are you familiar at all with the autopsy report that Reince Priebus made after the 2012 Mitt Romney?
I'm not, but please like enlighten us.
So when Romney lost in 2012 to Obama, and afterwards Reince Priebus, who was the head of the Republican Party at the time, did this poll. He got his advisors together, the top thinkers at the time in the Republican Party, and said, well, we lost. Like, what is the future of the Republican Party, and what do we need to do to be seen as a viable party in the future? What do we need to, what issues do we need to take up? What direction are we going in? And the autopsy that came out of that was that we need to be more open to, we need to have more outreach to women, more outreach to Americans of color,
I do remember this now. Yep. Thank you. Yeah, I do
Um,
remember this. Yeah.
we need to tackle immigration reform, all those things that that really. So in 2012 or in 2016, I was an early supporter of Marco Rubio.
Mm-hmm.
Because he espoused a lot of those things. I thought he would widen the party, open that tent up to be a big tent again of the Republican Party. He was talking about, he was one of the Gang of Eight who did immigration reform that I believed in.
Yep.
But instead, the Republican Party went the exact opposite direction, right? I mean, they just,
Yeah.
I mean, the Republican Party used to get 70% of the Asian American vote. Now they lose 70% of the Asian American vote.
Yeah.
Like it's, Muslim bans. He's talking, shithole countries. I'm gonna say that because he said it. Like if you're uncomfortable with me saying that, then you should be uncomfortable with the president saying that, right? Just children in cages, just like things that if you were like if you believed in that actual like integrity of human life and human decency, that you would just completely reject on face.
Yeah.
So he's really gone the opposite direction, and that's the way that I would like to see the Republican Party is. I'm afraid that there's no way it can happen because a lot of the politicians now who have espoused Trumpian ideas and who are behind Trump, it would be just complete hypocrisy for them to go back and try to turn the party around again, right? I don't think that they can steer the ship that way. It's just you're going to run into hypocrisy problems because politicians have all gotten in line behind Trump and haven't criticized him for the things that he's done a lot. And really have just flip-flopped on a lot of the issues. I mean, there are very few politicians that haven't done that. Mitt Romney's one, Jeff Flake, those kinds of people. They just really haven't espoused the Trump and gotten in lockstep behind Trump. And they're the ones who said, well, their beliefs now or their beliefs were their beliefs 4 years ago and 5 years ago. And so I can believe that those are the beliefs they're going to have in 10 years from now. Or the people who have flip-flopped in some of these other policy issues, I don't know where they're going to be. And
what about someone like Nikki Haley? Like what is, someone who was critical of Trump? She might have served for Trump, in the United Nations, but she's not, I haven't seen her saying, I don't know. I guess there's, what would your thoughts be on someone like that?
She was the governor of South Carolina. And I tend to think, my personal belief is the governors make the best presidents, even if they're a little bit more.
I would agree, and I totally agree.
I do think that governors tend to be a little bit more imperial presidents. If you look back at the history of governors in the White House, it's they hold a little more power. So I think they tend to be a little bit more imperial presidents, and I don't necessarily know if that's good or bad, but I do believe that they are because they know how to run executive branch of the government. So I think that she could be good, but again, I would have no idea what she stands for. She's been back and forth on issues, right? She criticizes Trump and then doesn't criticize Trump, and then it's kind of like a weak, whimpering criticism of Trump when she does.
Yeah.
I don't know what she would stand for, to be honest.
Wouldn't you say though that's kind of politics in general though? Like you might not like the face of the party, say it's President XYZ, but he's the nominee and you kind of got to fall in line. I've seen something on social media, especially with voting for Biden, a lot of Bernie supporters who are prominent and be like, hey, we didn't get our nominee, but this isn't a Lyft ride, this is like a bus stop. You get on and you get off as close as you can, and Bernie's is and Biden's as close as you can.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say to though if it's like, hey, this is just politics as usual, like you might not agree with everything, you might not be part of the cult of personality, but he's the nominee, and so we'll just vote party line.
I would say, I mean, what are your ideals, right? I mean, you should have ideals that you hold deep in your heart that you should be voting for, and find the candidate whose policies best align with those ideals. And that's your job as an American. That's your job. That's your duty as a registered voter, right? Is to have those ideals, research the issues, and then find the person whose policies best align with those issues. I understand that people are, there are single issue voters out there, like abortion being the biggest one, right?
Yeah.
But I could talk about that as well, and how as somebody who's anti-abortion, I think abortion should be much rarer than it is now. But somebody who's anti-abortion, can vote for Biden as well.
Yeah, there's our guest last week was, I would say, more of a single issue voter, and you got to respect him. Like you say, okay, but I mean that's kind of the great thing about America is you can cast your vote for who you believe, and I can cast my vote for how I believe, and
exactly.
At the end of the day, we go home.
Just put a little plug in there. Biden personally is pro-life. I don't know if you knew that, but Biden personally is pro-life. He just does not want to force his religion on. He's a devout Catholic. Doesn't want to force his religion on the country. So, I mean, you can say whether or not how much impact he would actually have as a one-term president, most likely on the abortion debate. So, anyways.
Yeah. Yeah, well, abortion. I mean, I don't want to go down rabbit hole, but for me, I would say I feel like there seems to be some middle ground. We don't
need to get into that. We're talking about not about
yeah, that's true. Well, so I guess are you worried at all? Election time comes, like. For me, I feel like the election is going to be decided in courts, just the way, mail-in voting, like every state does it differently. Some states don't even look at ballots until the election day, and then they count up all the mail-in votes, which seems to be like a recipe for a disaster. Like, what are you afraid of come November 3rd and like the next couple of months? Do you think we'll have a crisis? Do you think the election will be decided by courts? Like, we'll play it out for our audience, and
I don't like making predictions because
we won't hold you to it.
They're often wrong. So.
Yeah.
That's why I'm not going to predict who's going to win either. They're often wrong. But I mean I see a possibility of Trump not accepting the results of the election.
No.
And I think at that point, you may find some politicians a little bit more spine to stand up to him because it is a free and fair election. It's by all accounts, all scientific studies have shown that voting is not fraudulent, at least not to like the grand scale that's been proposed to us. I think that there will be a delay in counting votes just because of the amount of mail-in votes and things like that. But I do see a scenario where Trump could reject the results of the election. I think at that point it would go to judge, obviously Supreme Court judges, things like that. And I think you would find a lot more politicians with spine saying, this is actually you need to go. It's like this is what free and fair election, you can't really contest that. So
yeah, I definitely
whether or not Trump's like dying the wolves, Trump supporters will believe that or not, I don't know. I think I don't know. They seem to follow him whatever he says, so I can't say whether or not they'll reject that premise of election results.
You certainly hope so that there can be that's one of the hallmarks of the American life, right? The American culture we've talked about is like, hey, peaceful transition of power, and it doesn't seem like it's too far. Like, no, you propose that to, hey, Trump might not leave peacefully kind of thing. People might be like, yeah, that sounds like Trump. He wouldn't accept the election results. Yeah, that sounds like Trump. Which is kind of sad. Like our elected leader, not, that people could say that about him and they'd be like, yeah, that sounds like him.
Yeah, we want to talk about being against American ideals. Not accepting a free and fair election result is maybe top of the list. So
yeah, exactly. Well, I guess, so what would you say, kind of, more in the kind of wrapping up here, what would you say, like, to someone who, is kind of in the middle of the fence and is like, I don't know, Biden, he doesn't really seem like much of a candidate. I don't really know who I'm voting for, but like Trump, like I can't like get behind him, what he said, his policies. Like, what do you say? What do you say to someone who's kind of undecided?
Well, I'd say, let's take a look back at the last 4 years of the Trump presidency, right? Trump has really, he's officially validated hate as a response to politics. he's normalized hate, fear, villainizing the other side. And really, a lot of what you see from the diehard Trump base is the Democrats are out to destroy America. Their intent is to destroy American ideals. That is their intent. And once you accept that premise, there's really nothing you can do to be dissuaded from it. No amount. You can't listen to anything from the other side, because the intent of what they're saying is to undermine American ideals, and that's what you fear the most. So I would say, is that really what you want to see the future of America look like? Let's look at the Trump presidency. What has he done, right? The big hallmarks that people say, that Trump supporters say, is, well, okay, he's lowered taxes, and he has appointed conservative judges. That's something any Republican would have done, And because of those two things, you have accepted the Muslim ban, like pretty big misogyny and boasting about sexual assault, things like that. You don't have to take both of those sides of, there's other politicians who will espouse those ideals that you believe in, and you don't have to take that part to get what you want. Does it make sense?
Yep.
And the way to stop that from happening is to make him lose, and lose big.
Yeah.
Right.
It's almost kind of the same argument that some people were making about nominating Bernie Sanders and like socialism, like put Bernie on the ticket, put socialism on the ticket, make it lose big. So that way people, like the Democratic Party says, like, hey, look, like maybe socialism's not really going to sell here. It's the exact same argument as like put Trump on the ballot, make him lose big. And when realize people like, hey, like, decency, we need to make the tent a little bit bigger, like, civility, like those go a long way. They still resonate with a lot of people.
Exactly. And I mean, the presidency matters, right? It matters. It absolutely does. It blends the civil discourse in our society as Americans. And the way to denounce the incivility and the name calling and all of those things that we have seen from Trump in his presidency, you may say, okay, well, he's enacted policies that I like, but I don't agree with all of these things. Well, the way to get rid of all of those things is to make him lose.
Yeah.
And then next time you can get somebody who doesn't have all of those things, but espouses the principles that you believe in.
Yep, I agree. As I phrased it to my family, like, I don't want to amplify Trump. He's the loudest voice right now in the Republican Party, and he's not who I want to be amplifying.
And a second Trump presidency will further normalize hate, will further normalize villainizing the other side as an appropriate response to politics, and that is not an appropriate response to politics. Yeah. I think it's interesting because the previous two nominees for the Republican Party were very much civil people who got along with the other side and were very, they were good people, they were nice people. I don't know what else to say. They were nice people who just had philosophical differences. And that's the heart of America, is we're just, I don't believe that people are in their heart evil. I don't believe that even Trump wants to destroy America and destroy American ideals. I don't believe that, because that is a toxic, that's a toxic thought, right? I don't believe that he's trying to do that. But I do have major philosophical differences with it, and I do believe that the morals of the presidency are reflected in the morals of America. We should believe that the presidency absolutely affects the culture of America. And what culture do you want? You want a culture of you are out to win no matter what. That the best part of you is the part that wins at all costs and has all this fear of losing and fear of the unknown and things like that. I would say that's what a second Trump presidency looks like. And I know it sounds like alarmist and stuff like that, but I truly believe that if we elect Trump again, they will further normalize that, and then we'll get even more divided.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of, we just recently watched Mighty Ducks, the first one, and it kind of reminds me of the Hawks. It really does, I don't know if you've seen Mighty Ducks in a while.
It's been a while, I need to watch some more Emilio Estevez. And
yeah.
sweat.
Well, it's that, yeah. Watch it. Let me know what you think. All my audience, watch Mighty Ducks and, check out the coach of the Hawks. And, that was kind of his philosophy. But Mark, thanks a lot for coming on the podcast. I think you're really onto something. I don't think you have to take the undesirable character traits, leadership qualities that we see in Trump.
Yeah, and nor should you forgive them just to get what you want.
Yeah,
like that's my point is that's a bigger deal than not getting the small policies that you want for 3 years, right? 3 or 4 years. So,
and and that's the beauty of, there's one last point. There's a lot of talk about America, racist at the beginning because the founders were slave owners. The founders weren't perfect men, but it is interesting that people appeal to the same institutions to reclaim their rights. And then also these institutions have been pretty durable to, keep power separated, to keep, hey, if you don't like the current president, you don't like the policies, 4 years, you have another chance to vote them out, and then you can make your case. And it seems to be with all the flaws, the institutions have seemed to held up pretty well. And I think I agree. You don't want to accept the premise that the other side is out to destroy America, because then if that's what you accept, then you kind of give a blank check to your own internal party, to the other side, to do whatever it wants, because, hey, these guys on the other side are worse. And that leaves kind of everyone.
Yeah, and you're not willing to listen to alternate ideas or things that, new ideas or new things that come out, because the intent of those things is to destroy America and American ideals. I just don't buy that premise. I don't believe that politicians are out to destroy America or anything like that. I mean, I heard a lot of that about Obama and stuff like that, and I was like, I can't accept that premise. It's a toxic idea. So
8 years later, America was still okay after Obama, and hopefully 4 or 8 years after Trump, hopefully it's still okay. And but
I do believe that if we continue along the path of Trump, it will further normalize these things that are the worst part of human nature and society. So
I agree. Yeah, it's definitely not something we want to aspire to. It's not something we would teach our kids. So why would we want to have it be the face of the nation?
Yep.
So, Mark, as always, it's a pleasure. Thanks for joining the hub.
Happy to do it.
Thanks for joining.
Yeah, if working for Exxon didn't take me away from any future political aspirations, then this podcast probably will.
Well, we're not quite the Joe Rogan type audience, but we're definitely more than my mom and dad. So that's a plus.
Yeah, not that I had any future political aspirations. So, anyways.
Well, thanks, Mark. We'll see you.
Pleasure. Thanks. Yep. Thanks for giving me the pulpit. So.
Yeah, we love having you. That's what this is for, to give people a space to talk. So.
Okay. All right. Thanks, man.